All right, so I'm going to read this post 85, a Unio Mystica, which I wrote or published Thursday, March 10th, 2016. And it's kind of my, first, I don't know, not first, but I was trying to basically create a starting point of looking into the grimoires and getting a comprehensive overview of all of them and where they sort of come from, and their relation to or influence on the general literature of over the last 500 years or so. And it's kind of another little not literary, but books seem to have a very unique type of synchronicity, very tied in with the Kabbalistic, sort of numerology systems, and it's just funny to find that one of the most recent books by Stephen Skinner, which I had gotten this one and had to wait, but then since it came relatively quick, I got this one also, and I only just found out that it's only essentially two-fifths, because it's the first two books, while another volume will have the next three. But basically, these first two books are 85 total chapters, and it's just funny because right after I did post 82, I got the Vajra Rosary Tantra, which 82 comes up in, and it's just funny how these little threads will guide things. But 85 is kind of like a divine number. It's the number of the word divine, but then also dove, which is the divine bird, the holy bird or whatever, for the Holy Spirit. And there's so many different little connections I've slowly found, and it's it's got figure number properties or whatever, which actually is also mentioned in this post, and I quote, beginning on page 26 of Arthur Koestler's The Sleepwalkers. And none of this was, again, planned. It's just weird, but I've realized this connection between 85 being pei, essentially, the Hebrew letter pei, which there is this alternate spelling that it could be 81 of pei and aleph. And I kind of analyzed this, started thinking of the whole tower symbolism after the post 80, which is pei itself, and preparing for 81, which I was translating the Tantra Loka. And there's some deep connection, essentially, with just the Kabbalistic legends, I guess, of the Tower of Babel, which is Migdal Babal 111, and then this whole pei, or the languages, the tongue or mouth symbolism, which Kenneth Grant goes into extensively throughout outside the circles of time, and also it's more implicit, but it's throughout the ninth arch. And so 26 being Yod He Vav He, which is there's a lot to that too, because it's also, as Kenneth Grant mentions throughout, Yod He Vav He reversed is the true name of Satan, which he's actually quoting Albert Pike, ironically, and this whole thing goes deep. And so I just want to start this and then kind of refer to different things, because it's been a long time of me trying to, not quickly, but still maintain cognition of all the things that I grasped or gained awareness of with translating the Tantra Loka and all the different things. It was a long period of time, and so many different subjects that don't necessarily connect historically, but then in gematria and in all these other ways they kind of do. And it's funny because the grimoires are more of a practical way of approaching these things, and then they're ancient, well, not ancient necessarily, but they're very old and archaic is what we think of them as archaic, but they're actually somehow useful still, just to say that. Because, like, I was reading this Summa Sacrae Magicae, and I actually didn't want to quote the first opening. And I listened to Stephen Skinner's interviews recently, and he kind of gives a lot of insight into it all. But even the very beginning of this describes magic as being very involved with words, like names, and which there is a lot of focus on that. Even the name of Satan, which Stephen Skinner mentions how, like, for the time it was very rare, and for this book to, like, have survived is just ironic. It's funny, but the whole thing is, like, again, there's a justification in kind of towards the end. I wouldn't say necessarily justification, but an explanation as to why it, like, approaches that so head on. But again, Stephen Skinner describes this as being, influential to many other grimoires, but especially John Dee's, like, Enochian system overall. And there's also another major focus on the directions, essentially, and, like, the fortification of the directions, which, relating to 85, there's a lot to this, in different ways to look at it. Like 85 being 5 times 17. 5 is like the fifth element, but it implies a lot of things. And then 17 is the swastika, which, again, the motion, time itself being that sort of fifth element. And this 17th kala and the fifth element both arising from the four, so to speak, the matrix of the four. And so basically the beginning says, general introduction, blah, blah, blah. Magic is the science of restraining, artandi, to constrain or limit, evil and benevolent spirits by the name of God and by his own names and by the names of other worldly things, saeculum, things of the age, world, or universe. Whence it follows that the knowledge of words is magical, because every name is a word, since a word is everything which is uttered by the tongue. So, if it can be written in letters. Now, and it just makes, like, each one of these things is kind of profound to different aspects of 85. So anyway, now, not just 85, but 85 and 26, Yade Vave. Now there are many sciences of words, such as grammar, logic, and rhetoric, essentially the trivium, and magic, but in different ways, because grammar is about the congruent word in order, and logic in order is needed to discern truth, and rhetoric in order to discern or to denote justice. But there is magic about the word which is used to narrow down the spiritual substance. For there is in some words a wonderful power created by the Creator alone, who is God Almighty and the cause of all causes, just as you see about herbs and gems, except that in a more excellent way than ad infinitum without comparison. And this can be assessed among the inexperienced by his law, because the law says that with blessed words the bread is transubstantiated into the flesh of the Christos. Let him also say that with words God created the heavens and the angels. He should also say that with his words he healed the sick and raised the dead and buried. Also let him say that whatever is asked of the word by believing with faith and not wavering, that it will be done. And he puts extra effort into the transformation of the mountains and about the uprooting of the sycamore trees. Thus nothing is impossible for the believer. Magic, then, is about wonderful words springing from faith or proceeding from a firm belief. Belief, however, is not an essential part of magic, Stephen Skinner adds, but so that he may believe in God, in truth, and in the magic art, and in his teacher, and in the law, to whom he has devotion. But it is better for him that he believe in Christianity, which is the root of all other trivial things, as the experience of magic teaches us, presupposed by the workman's due dignity of himself, and the sanctification appropriate to the experience, and the knowledge of the art documenting it. With these three suppositions as the foundation of your work, I want to lay down for you here one universal practice necessary for all work, without which nothing is done. And this is to make evil spirits come and appear. And then this universal rule is applicable to every particular through which you wish to work. Because if you omit this universal, although you leave nothing out of your particular, what you find in any of your Bibles, here meaning any other holy book or authoritative text, such as an important grimoire, the spirits will not come, or the event of their arrival will be rare, and will only work for some other reason. In chapter 2, it says the universal prayer for the journey, and it says it's from the Liber Juridis, or the Liber Juridis could have got it from here. It doesn't clarify, but when you go to any circle, say the prayer of the journey, which is this. So there's a lot of like prayers then fortifications for the circles, and then there's also the 7 planets, which would move in the quadrants or quarters of the circle. Testimonial conjuration for the seasons. Something told me also when I first got this the other day to look at page 85, and that's when I was like, it has a lot. It says winds of the 4 cardinal directions, and then it has something to do with the 40 winds, and the winds and the breath do connect with the Yod He Vav He and the Pei, especially in like other aspects when you consider the Buddhist sort of symbolism of these things, or Hindu, because 26 can also be Ka, which has relations to the middle pillar or the central channel essentially, and then also Eka, which is like 1, and 85 it's a lot of things, but I haven't even started this post, so I should just say, like, by critically examining the patterns of history in the fields of science, politics, and spirituality, we can better understand the mechanics and interrelation of each to know how to better navigate or possibly even avoid many of the recurring pitfalls, brick walls, and stagnancies along the helical axle of historical progress toward real advancement. By surveying the development of each in both respects of their contributions as well as their setbacks, we can better understand our present circumstances and potential solutions. In his book, The Sleepwalkers, A History of Man's Changing Vision of the Universe, Arthur Koestler goes through the rise of modern science from its origins with the Babylonians to relatively recent times with one of the apparent points showing how mankind has been at many scientific, social, and spiritual standstills, often at the time thought to be the height of scientific capacity, or conversely the end of human history. It is usually by way of strong-willed intellectuals, or sometimes not even necessarily that, but who felt the drive, or in some cases a pull, to go against the grain of the commonly accepted opinions of the time, oftentimes at the expense of their life for heresy. We can then see that what were called heretics and witches of the past were various martyrs, activists, suffragists, etc. The rigidity in which we view and maintain compartmentalization over these fields is a bar from their progress, which is neither scientific, politically correct, nor very effective. The same fundamental constituents of the philosophies of both science and magic is number. In speaking about Pythagoras as the founder of a new religious philosophy and the founder of science, as the word is understood today, on page 26, Arthur Koestler goes on to say, "Sweetness does not enter the Pythagorean universe, but it contains one of the most powerful tonics ever administered to the human brain. It lies in the Pythagorean tenets that philosophy is the highest music, and that the highest form of philosophy is concerned with numbers, for ultimately all things are numbers. The meanings of this oft-quoted saying may perhaps be paraphrased thus: all things have form, all things are form, and all forms can be defined by numbers. Thus, the form of the square corresponds to a square number, i.e. 16 being 4 by 4, whereas 12 is an oblong number, and 6 a triangular number. Numbers were regarded by the Pythagoreans as patterns of dots, which formed characteristic figures, as on the sides of a dice, and though we use Arabic symbols which have no resemblance to these dot patterns, we still call numbers figures, i.e. shapes. Between these number shapes, unexpected and marvelous relations were found to exist. For instance, the series of square numbers was formed simply by the addition of successive odd numbers. 1 and 3 making 4, plus 5 making 9, plus 7, 16, plus 9, 25, and so on. The addition of even numbers formed oblong numbers where the ratio of the sides represented exactly the concordant intervals of the musical octave. In a similar manner, cubic numbers and pyramidal numbers were obtained. Nicarchus had been a gem engraver, so Pythagoras in his youth must have been familiar with crystals, whose form imitated those of pure number shapes: quartz, the pyramid and double pyramid; beryl, the hexagon; garnet, the dodecahedron. It all went to show that reality could be reduced to the number series and number ratios if only the rules of the game were known. To discover these was the chief task of the Philosophus, the lover of wisdom. An example of the magic of numbers is the famous theorem by which alone Pythagoras is consciously remembered today: the visible peak of the submerged iceberg. Ironically, Pythagoras seems to have no complete proof of the Pythagorean theorem. There is no obvious relationship between the lengths of the sides of a right-angled triangle, but if we build a square over each side, the areas of the two smaller squares will exactly equal the area of the larger. If such wonderfully ordered laws, hitherto hidden from the human eye, could be discovered by the contemplation of number shapes, was it not legitimate to hope that soon all secrets of the universe would be revealed through them? Numbers were not thrown into the world at random. They arranged themselves into balanced patterns, like the shapes of crystals and the concordant intervals of the scale, according to the universal laws of harmony. Pages 29 through 30, or 31, I mean. Pages 29 through 31. By thus knowing the patterns and laws of the mechanisms that cause the precipitation of mentation, thought, and emotion, the magician can better direct the process with his will, which, it must be said again, is sometimes actually at odds with his wants and desires, and is therefore above the conscious waking level of cognition. The word cognition derives from the Latin root cognito, meaning concealed or of unknown identity, showing further the idea of the concealed processes which the concealed wisdom lets us better understand. Modern science has been at such a standstill, in many respects, as it has not been able to bridge the gap, or transcend the abyss, which language is largely inadequate to fulfill, at least on its own, of the outer world of materialization and the inner mental place of especially like with, I don't know, the whole AI situation makes me think of this, because it can't pick up on a lot of the depth of things, but anyway, of the outer world of of the outer world of materialization and the inner mental place of imagination, dreams, and the storehouse of intellect and creativity from which the former precipitates. It is as if being unable to properly put the whole internal drama of which fills 90% of man's mind and life into words to the letter, as that experienced by the consensus majority, were thrown out as if altogether unimportant and useless. As the psychoanalysts have shown, much of that is actually potentially very insightful, and as we have seen, more and more do in fact provide in its refuse heap a number of keys to our present external predicaments, if again we were to recognize and know how to apply, or essentially not just apply, but like when it comes to problems, there's this tendency to make things worse. But anyway, the crystal must keep growing. In Crowley's system of magic, which we have selected to be examined in detail for a reason, the aspirant or initiate is told to pick a magical name or motto which expresses the goal of their great work. And it's interesting that 66, which is the number of the great work, like the 66, or the 1 through 11, which is like the gestational, makes me think of the gestation of the egg, 11 being egg, and the symbolism of that with the great work. But it is almost rather impossible to know at the time what to expect upon taking this oath, but later many curious connections are found to be bound up in that singular formula, the whole essence of your subsequent attainments, and that initial seed or tendency ended up growing to be a driving willpower. That will more and more seem to have no definite source, with the original tendency being bound up completely in the prior and subsequent circumstances of the time. By also analyzing the tendencies of many ancestral and traditional rituals as similar seeds in the tapestry of the evolution of man, we can also further uncover the impetus and atavisms which form the very roots of our present systems of science, politics, and spirituality. We must be mindful not to neglect the past, no matter how tedious, boring, or painful it may be to look back countless times, so as to not let those attainments, trials, and errors go in vain and unlearned from. Much of that which we seek so strongly in all that is new can much more satisfactorily be gained from those who rightfully earned and presented it hundreds and thousands of years ago in their subtle words, now largely viewed as archaic. And so the Buddhanu Smrti, or the recollection of the Buddha, and the different things that whole subject relates to comes to mind. I have made the revealed wisdom of 666 known in a year's worth of publications, and now I am applying it in various methods and seek to reveal more keys of practical value that have still for too long gone unknown, so that the power of this hieroglyph can be further understood and obtained. And this flower makes me think of how I just realized that Chinois, which is Richard Wilhelm's spelling of it, although here it says Jinhua, and it's funny because Jin, wherever it's at, is metal in Chinese, but then metal is 85, but Chinois, as Richard Wilhelm, which right here is Chinois Sung Chi by Richard Wilhelm, The Secret of the Golden Flower, and Chinois would be the golden flower, which is like the aura, or the divine light, essentially, which cycles. But Datu also translates as metal, and Datus is 85. So there's all these little connecting things that it could be confusing, but it could also be used as like memory mnemonics or memory devices. But what was I going to say? Oh yeah, the flower and the Chinois and the metal. And it's funny because like metal essentially is the fifth element. Could be that you can think of it like the fifth element, especially being the mold, or the matrix or form. Note that there are 72 angels which must be called upon in order to assist in conquering and controlling the 72 demons. 72 is the number of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh spelled out in triangular form, as well as the Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh spelled out. It is said that the tongues, or languages, when confused at Babel, were divided into 72, which is also the Greek word lalia, of speech, and really symbolizes the confusion of tongues and the fragmentation of language and ultimately the collective human psyche. And also like the cleaving of Adam and Eve apart, but as well as the they're like being cast from heaven, was from Kamael, and Kamael in Hebrew is like Cheth Mem Vav Aleph Lamed, or just Camael, which kind of makes me think of a camel, essentially, or Gimel, but then 85 is Gamma. So, again, there's like this tight, complex symbolism of Camael, which is actually the archangel of Jabura, and there's another, like, keep saying there's like another and there's more, but there really is. Like Jabura in Hebrew, Gimel, Beth, Vav, Resh, Hey, it's 216, but then spelled out, Jabura is 222 really, and so, or like Hey, Jabura, but Camael with the Tlephoth of Jabura, which is Samael, spelled out as 222, or in Hebrew, Smal, it's 85, 216. So Jabura contains both Camael, the archangel, and then Samael, the Tlephothic counterpart. And really then 216 I also noticed, plus 85, Jabura and Camael is 301, which is Mars itself. And what else was it? So Mars in Kabbalah, Tlephoth, and Goetic Magic, Thomas Carlson goes into how Jabura contributes to the fall, essentially, but Camael, it says he spells him with a flaming sword. He's associated with the flaming sword as well as the chalice, or goblet. And then when you look at the different Hebrew, oops, not that, but not only is it the foundation, because Yesod is 80, so Ha Yesod, it would be the foundation, so the moon, which relates to the generational, well, really 1 through 9 is Adam. I don't know, I'm trying to sort all this out, but basically Gimel, Beth, Yod, Ayin, it's like Gavia is how it's pronounced, but Jabio, which here on the Writing the Base thing they have it wrong as Gbigh, but it would be Ayin, meaning chalice. Mileh, circumcision, which they say is like the covenant. It also is more symbolic of like the revealing, and it has to do with the moon again. So a cover, to cover, or to remove, or reveal. A set time, festival, the new or full moon. And then a chair or a throne, which again relates to Yesod, and then also Binah. And another translation is time, or like now, actually, like the time of now, which is always present, but also like moving. And so again, the 5, the fifth element, the 17, which is really related to the swastika, and then both of them being prime, they have to do, the primes themselves have to do with that regenerative unity, and again, 80, like unity is 85, but then so is 2, and 2, which is Chakma, kind of extends from the unity of Kether, and so again, it's like this divine descent. And there's a depiction of a dove by Robert Flood. I thought it was Jacob Boehm, but it was Robert Flood, and it says like fiat, like kind of like Yod He Vav He from heaven, and then a dove coming down a circle, and fiat is also Yod He Vav He, or 26, and then dove. It's just funny, like in the white light, the Godhead, the whole Malkuth cycle symbolism. But yeah, the chalice in the Ancient Secret, which the Ancient Secret is 439, which is the 85th prime. The Ancient Secret by Flavia Anderson talks about how the flaming sword, essentially, or the firebrand, which is, all these things interconnect. That's why I'm trying to like go over them all, even though it's all crazy. It has to do with the fall, the splitting of the sexes or genders, which that may be the most controversial thing so far. Jesus, he's also, like, Camiel appears in Luke and gives him strength, essentially. And when you take 666 and just check it with 85, you get 581, and that happens to be the number of strength. Strength actually with a shin, so like the fire and the spirit. So divine strength would be 666, and or metal strength, which has a more practical connotation, alchemical. But yeah, so this Camiel mystery. Also devil, the way that King James spelled it in demonology, devil would be 55, but with the extra L is 85. And it's interesting what he says about all of it. That's why it's reprinted, and it's kind of important to read. But the devil is God's ape, and so again, this whole the literature of witchcraft is it would fall into that connection, because not only is there, practical grimoires, and there's the anti-witchcraft literature, there's all sorts of more modern academic approaches, and it's just important to consider that all. And so, I've been contemplating how some of this could be more conducive to being confusing, but I don't know, it's just crazy how it's all there. And when I looked at the 85, the Greek isopsophy things that equal 85, it's interesting. It's Zoe in Greek, actually, which is life, because normally I had mentioned it with 82 is Zoe, but it would be Ada, so 8. But Thea Magia, or Magia, divine magic, from the Greek magical papyri. And I looked that up, and it was like a curse towards the moon, but kind of similar in respect to the Summa Sacrae Magicae, which ends up talking, again, giving a sort of justification for, I don't know if I'm quoting in the right word, but tempting God in a sense. And then Meli, which is kind of important, the honey. It's 85 being the mouth. There's a lot of Maotian connections, which the bee connects to. But Yesod, the moon. This precious stone, diamond or adamant, made me think of how 58, which is the reflection of 85, and 58 being Ha-Aben, or the stone, in a more general sense. But the green stone, the book The Green Stone, which when you look at that, the Green Stone, 476, that's actually, when you take the Tau from that and give it a death, it's 85. So unity, like I mentioned, or 2, unity being 85, and then 666 minus 476, or the green stone, would be 190, which is the number of wisdom itself, which is what Chakma, or the second Sephira, is. So unity, wisdom, or 2, wisdom, Chakma, wisdom, Veils 666, which again is it's just a funny code that makes me think of how Chakma being the duality in a sense, or again, this whole complex of, you could call it the devil or Satan or whatever, but the imitation or the reflection, which is kind of the root of magic. And it makes me think of the whole retrosity nature of 0 through 99, which is that sort of a secret or occult way of looking at numbers themselves, like how the tarot shifts the number system down with the Fool being 0. So it throws things off a little, but it also makes a funny little loop in a weird way, that 0 through 99 being 1 through 100, and how on the diamond, when you turn the square of that, reflect it, and such as I've quoted, because it's not like I said it, but I got that whole idea from Jim Egan, and who got it from Bob Marshall, and how that all kind of ties in with the Monas Hieroglyphica and John Dee. This divine magic, or really HIGH, high magic way of looking at the divine light, or this divine, the Grail knowledge, which it's funny to say that. It's just funny that that's what some of this stuff leads to. But the gamma being really the gammadion, or like the fly-foot cross, meaning the flying gamma, or rotating gamma, I ended up realizing, like, further confirmation, so to speak, since the swastika is 666, the gammadion, the non-final, happens to be 888, which is that higher dimensional hypercube, what the hypercube opens up to in a lot of alchemical ways, with like 777, 888, 999 being this gradual sequence that 666 acts as a sort of like barrier for, or whatever. Like, it's, I don't want to say necessarily barrier, because it's also elementally generative. 666 being 1 through 36, obviously, which ties into the Samkhya, or really the Kashmir Shaivism consciousness arising out of the 5 elements, or really the 4 elements activated by the 5th. So again, it's like it's exceedingly complicated in a way, but all these things are already, they're connected. It's just not consciously recognized. The Japanese name of the swastika is Manji. So again, 111 being that whirling motion of LF, the swastika. So this whirling motion, or gammadion, fly-fit, swastika, I actually had recently got Thomas Wilson's book on the swastika, and it goes into a lot of different aspects. Like, it was even in technology as like a kindling starter, and I forgot the actual code for that, but if I can find it real quick. Oh yeah, swastika kindling lighters. So swastika is 167, which that alone has interesting relations, like woman, and how the swastika of man and woman go in different directions, and so do the chakras, allegedly, or according to certain sources. But there's a male and female swastika, so to speak, and those are called dishas, or directions in Sanskrit. And chakra wheel dishas is 666, but swastika kindling lighters, so fire starters, ancient, he describes it, but basically it's funny. 777, actually, I had it on this page to try to remember. There's a lot dealing with Agni and the Agni Kayana that Fritz Stahl talks about in his like monumental 2-volume thing about Agni and the Agni Kayana of the Nambu Diri. And the Agni Kayana ties in, like, there's this other book called The Astronomical Code of the Rig Veda, but the Agni Kayana is this major fire ritual, essentially, that the theology of which is very deep, and I'd have to go into that also deep, like later on, after I absorb it more, decode all this stuff more, lay somewhat of a introduction, of a foundation. But it's like this they consider it in a universal context, as ever, and it is like a lineage that hasn't stopped. But so where was I? I was in this post. Oh yeah, because 72 in the Goetia, and there's a lot of connection to all this. And Stephen Skinner is adamant about not considering magic from a psychological point of view, even though there is, you could say, a reality to it, or there's basis in looking at that from that view, but I think that's almost like the initiatory, or not initiatory, but elementary way of looking at it, that certain things end up being way more profound, creative, and that's why in that book, The Summa Sacra Magicae, he, in the beginning, but also towards the end, talks about the importance of not necessarily belief, but firm faith. And because there's something to do with the creative power of, you call it will, but it's really divine in nature, and like a gift of God, a gift from God, in a sense. So anyway, this fragmentation or separation is necessary for growth and evolution, if only growth of wisdom and understanding is gained in the process. Meaning, not necessarily physical, but like retained. 72 is also related to the Saturnian and lunar growth processes, as hinted at, or hinted by the fact that the Earth's volume is 72 times less than that of Saturn's, while 72 times more than that of the Moon's. Being 8 times 9, we also see it as a veiled connection between the lower Ogdoad from Doth to Malkuth and the higher Ennead from Kether to Yesod, wherein Doth and Malkuth are restored. 72 is also Ob, at Zilith's secret nature, the astral light of the Bindu, which is the point of nexus between the lower and higher, or inner and outer, front and back sides of the tree. Note also that a reduced form of the tree of life in Hebrew, Atz Chaim, as Chaim, is 72, as well as Zizim, or Zimzum, essentially, the Hebrew form of a Big Bang. Note also change, which is the formula of magic, essentially, but it is further specifically denoted as a formula of magic. If an in-depth and meticulous perusal of the following material is effected, it will be seen why the particular system of magic is being utilized here, as it is the single most comprehensive, illuminating, and integral of all other systems as of yet analyzed. The majority of materials have been linked either to the actual text or the information about it. And again, like, obviously this was a long time ago, and I wasn't privy to certain things, like about the grimoires, the depth of them, their lack of actual continuity, and they're very patchy. Some of them are entirely, I don't want to say necessarily original, but not really, I don't know how to explain it, not necessarily, not influenced, but internally or spontaneously influenced. And I don't know, there's certain things that like are misspellings in a way, although this Salaminus spelling, I've seen it spelt that way in certain like contexts, but 666 veils the magical wisdom tradition and all its gnosis. It is the key of traditional witchcraft, using the term as it was often in the 15 and 1600s. So again, like those old archaic spellings are interesting to consider the Kabbalistic connections of, especially their counterparts. Also known as Sabbatic witchcraft, and the value of the witch Sabbath. And then I realized later that Sabbati, or like, it makes me think of Kenneth Grant talking about this venom Sabbati, the wine of the moon, essentially. But Sabbati is 85. A Sabbath is a festival for the changing of seasons. So again, the quadrants, but derives from the Hebrew Shabbatai, Saturn, which Saturday is named, after which Saturday is named, and the day of rest and the end of the week. Like the Black Mass, an inversion of the Catholic Mass, the Sabbath was used to celebrate or do rituals rather than rest. The term Sabbatic witchcraft generally refers to the more or less traditional systems which emphasize a naturalistic and ritualistic typology utilizing plants, animals, minerals, and the various applications and extrapolations thereof. Much of the fantastic imagery associated with magic and witchcraft comes from the very long-held tendency to misunderstand the true nature of them as the remnants and recalibration of various shamanic traditions and cultural memories. Thus, we see a shamanic ritual also holds the same value, and like the Sabbat or magical ritual, the ritual is usually accompanied with the alteration of cognition through wine and strange drugs, or in some way involving the circle, either a ceremonial circle around a central fire or the rending thereof for travel or communication beyond. Note, Saturn being god of agriculture and growth, as well as time, Kronos with the scythe, is a form of death and the devil, the devourer of the young and the great initiator. As a veritable key of it all, 666 is not only the key which unlocks Liber Elvel Legis, or the Book of the Law. I have found it to unlock all grimoires and systems and act as a key to the solution to any problem. 666 is the brass vessel of magic, the container in which Solomon is said to have concealed the demons, and being also both indicative of the soul within, as well as the mirror of materialization without. It is also the formula to control demons without from within, the soul within. It should be understood that only with the help of the proper angels can the demons be adequately restrained. It's funny because, I'm trying not to mention it and think about it even, but the whole Kazam movie synchromysticism, in which people have the false memory syndrome, so to speak, of, what is it? I'm confusing them already, but Shazam, of Sinbad as Shazam, and the whole symbolism of the genie in a bottle, and then that not existing as but it being a phantom memory that has certain symbolism, I guess you could say, to it. But Shazam with the extra A, VHS is 666, and so that the VHS itself being a sort of vessel or bottle. Because I don't know, finding that as a code was whenever I was researching and contemplating that whole situation, and the Mandela effect itself, is just, there's certain things, I don't know, I just find the symbolism of it funny, that regardless of the reality show, I don't want to say tendencies, but implications of being Twilight language in and of themselves, I guess. So anyway, that whole the Shazam VHS, which they ended up having people made physical copies that you can buy, just to sort of fulfill that nostalgia or whatever. But it should be understood that only with the help of the proper angels can the demons be adequately restrained. See the Goetia of Dr. Rudd by Stephen Skinner and David Rankin, 2007, which that's the year that Ordinez Descendens was published, which is alleges to be an authentic manuscript of John Dee, essentially, that someone found in some sort of chest, essentially, like a hidden compartment of a chest or box, and is, you could say, demonic in nature, and the guy's wife didn't want to get, she wanted to burn it, I guess, and I think she actually did, but they had copied it. It gives the whole history in it, and I had hand transcribed it just to read it and have this stuff searchable. So I'm familiar with it, and the procedure in which to hierarchically evoke the names that are derived from these tablets, essentially, which are one of the translations of Ordinez Descendens, which is the descending hierarchy, but it's also a qliphothic or like demonic inversion, similar to how the Goetia are like the demons, which have angelic counterparts. It's a demonic order, so to speak, or hierarchy. And I found that demonic order is 666. It's just funny because like there's knowledge that you can read in this and then see, not just it all equals 666, but there's Kabbalistic verification and like cross references and whatnot, and the hierarchical commanding essentially to compel is also something Stephen Skinner says is in Summa Sacrae Magicae, although he doesn't mention this, and it makes me wonder if he's familiar with it because he doesn't talk about it and almost no one does. But it lends credence to it being potentially authentic or inspired or whatever the case may be. But that was from 2007, so that came to mind. But 666 is a Solomon key to the knowledge of hygromancy, said to be the divination of water, but in actuality is a divination of and by the soul or psyche symbolized by water, and thus a key of soul or a key of growth of the soul. To know the key of Solomon is to possess it, and it is noteworthy that a form of the title of the grimoire of the key of Solomon itself, Clavicula Salomonis, is also 666, the number of talents of gold the king received each year. Further analysis of the magic grimoirium shows them all to be unified under the same magical power. So again, the solar vessel, essentially, or ring pass knot complex. I don't like saying the same words over and over, like complex, but that's what it kind of is interlocking, like it's quite dense. A magic arbitel de magia veterum, the Latin grimoire meaning of the magic of the ancients, or the magic light of the ancients, is also 666. Salomonicae, or knowledge of hydromancy, is concealed in the magical treatise of Solomon, and 666, concealing the true keys of magic knowledge to grow the soul and become God, is once again the formula of the soul within and the creation of existence without. 666 could also be the book of the angel Turiel's, Turiel being one of the fallen watchers in the book of Enoch. Turiel is the rock or mountain of God, and therefore could represent the fallen stone or Shaitan, the earthing or crystallizing of the above and the below, the growing crystal. 666 is also the magical book of Turiel digit, and 666 is the means of contact by the angel Turiel by this key. And it's all broken up, but it's all one formula. The Arabic Shams al-Marif, or Shams al-Marif wa Lata'if al-Arif in full, the book of the son of Gnosis and the subtleties of elevated things, also correlates with the solar Gnostic 666, key of all solar Gnostic keys. The Abano book of 7 magical elements, or Heptameron, further unveils the 7 rays of the light breath of Ruach, with Tiferet at the center, which concentrate into the outward cube of Malkuth. To master Malkuth, we are given the intellect in order to know the key of Solomon, in the Salomonis keys all in one Solomon key, Clavicula Salomonis, in the title all along, only for those with wisdom and understanding to know. 666 is also a Galgerbach book of magic key, referring to the 47 spell witchcraft book from Iceland, dating to around 1600. Also the Raudskina, a magic book, which legend says is a black magic power book, which gives power even over Satan. So a lot of these grimoires reference Satan, and including the Grand Grimoire and the Red Dragon, and also the Summa Sacrae Magicae, mention by name Satan, and this whole concept of Satan essentially being manifestation, and it's there's a lot of like I don't know, I'm not trying to like give an apologia for this literature and that, because I'm still studying it and I'm trying to understand it, but it's not like simply like brashly worshiping Satan. I don't like. It's just funny. Note that 666 control the angel Satan manifestation as well as control demons' thoughts, the primary aim of the Goetia. It is also the black pullet key, referring to the grimoire known as La Poule Noire, or the black pullet, which treats primarily of the science of magical talismans. 666 further denotes a Cyprianus, the Scandinavian legendary black book, the Svartaboken magic book. Another version of Cyprian's Liber is known to the Portuguese, but further, 666 is also Saint Cyprian's magic key. Being thus precise so as to reckon all grimoires as ultimately subsumed in one, 666 is a grimoire of Mayat, or truth, meaning the common grimorium verum. Conversely, it is also a grimoire of evil. It is also, which that's what a lot of them allege to be, but it also seems to be about constraining and conquering that. But it is both Black Mage and the Red Dragon, the subject and object, dreamer and dream, god and creation, mage and book. Another actual grimoire of evil is the Pope's Black Book of Magic, the Sworn Book of Honorius, or a Pope's Hidden Juridus. Another grimoire attributed to a Pope is a Magic Enchiridion of Leo. And Albert Waite did a lot to claim this as, or the Sworn Book of Honorius as like the most evil grimoire or whatever, but it seems important also to I don't know if I'd say study, but at least get familiarity with. Use the digitized magic squares and the gold Hebrew flower, or the letter number key wheel, a magical rose with 22 petals, for uncoding and encoding the yantra's keys, as the key map of the sigil and talisman magic, which is one form, which actually, again, Stephen Skinner points out how, like, Austin Osman Spare's similar sigil construction method is also in the Summa Sacrae Magicae. Moses' hidden occult books, the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th books of Moses, are also found correspondent, as well as another Arabic text of the hidden aim of the sage and the goal of the wise, the Gayat al-Hakim or Picatrix. Note that al-Hakim means all-wise and equals 666 with mem final. While not necessarily grimoires, the founding Rosicrucian texts, the Fama Fraternitatis as well as the Confessio Fraternitatis, are both subsumed under 666 in the Fama Fraternitatis Value and the Manifesto of Confessio. Translator Adam McLean in the Stegonographia of Johannes Trithemius, which Stephen Skinner also recently retranslated and published, maintains that the Latin Stegonographia conceals a grimoire of Kabbalistic angel magic, on page 7. And this further correlates even despite the variance in spelling of Kabbalah and magic. As for some more modern grimoires, the book Azoasia's code is also 666. And so is the Book of the Golden Toad, both grimoires by the late Andrew Chumley, who endeavored to revive the sabbatic craft. And note, 666 is a sabbatic craft's value. And Murray's thesis, which a lot of people seem to try to go out of their way to discount and discredit, even though she didn't really do much but write like 2 or 3 books on witchcraft. We also find 666 as the Necronomicon key. Key being 35, also gateway. And, Stephen Skinner has a book, The Keys to the Gateways of Magic. No, it's Keys to the Gateway. Summoning the Solomonic Archangels and Demon Princes. And this book is still like revealing deep aspects of itself. But being 631 less than 666, And 631 is also Thanatos, death, so a key of Thanatos, is thus the key or the gateway of Lam, with mem final, which is the portrait of Lam itself, or the image of Lam, the magical dragon. And note also that the actual title of Lam in Sanskrit is La Ma, thus La Ma, the way, with mem final, is a grimoire of Lam, or a type of grimoire of Lam. I have the key of the dragon book, and I am giving it to all who may be able to utilize it by opening, entering, and transgressing the portal of the bornless gold lamb egg. For the actual grimoires, see below, and more, see below. For a historical list of the primary works on magic and witchcraft which I have read and am familiar, see below. So again, this was my beginning, like when I started collecting the grimoires and then meticulously going through them with understanding that they may not consciously have like codes, but then also very well can and do. And so some of these things are really just like, I don't necessarily want to say botched, but very rough approaches to them. But there's a lot more to it, actually, like their Kabbalahs, the grimoires, and their sort of codes and extrapolations and what they can do. But yeah, so it's from 9 years ago. But so at least I tried to bring to light, show, point out, display, exhibit, or offer. 11. I was reading Kenneth Grant's this chapter, but then it goes into other things mentioning the mouth and pay in 85. But when reading this chapter, which it's pretty short, it really does a good job at really kind of summarizing some of the depth of the complex regarding the tower and evolution and the confusion of languages and whatnot, and the restoration, so to speak, of the lost word. But he says, in the Gates of Azin, several attempts have been made in recent times to recover traces of a series of magical formulae pertaining to the Gates of Azin. And that's like a mystery in and of itself, but it's related to Zayn and the Eon of Zayn. Similar almost to Shambhala, the future, or the Pure Land. And come to find out that Meru plus Shambhala is 666, and Meru is like kind of related to the whole fifth element, and there's certain traditions essentially of Maitreya or Maitreya. I'm just like clicking around trying to open one of these tabs. But basically, I ended up discovering recently that Maitreya can be spelled 85, but Maitreya with a hey, Maitreya Buddha is 111, and he's like brings love, and it means like loving friend or something. Love is of course 111. There's a lot to these different things. I want to bring him up in a minute. Oh yeah, Mahavakya is 85, which is like great saying or great words, and it relates to Vakya is what constitutes mantras essentially in their power. But Vakya, which is 38, is half of Devani, which is also related to the whole the Hindu philosophy of Devani, which I talked about in post 76, is another thing related to all that. Vaktra, which relates to Simhamukha, can be spelled with a tau, being 628. So and it means mouth essentially. Simhavaktra would be lion mouth, but Vaktra, Vakya. So different mouths and different tongues or languages being expressed in that. That's why it's important to look at these Sanskrit words like in their phonetic values, despite everyone getting in a hubbub if you use Hebrew on English or anything else. It's just, it seems to apply though. Someone's got a dog just moaning, just whining, dying outside. I don't know what they're doing. Anyway, independent groups of occultists and individuals working in isolation have received intimations in dreams. Oh yeah, it's about the Anagata Devamsa. I think it's pronounced. It's this book here. And the cover is interesting because Anagata Vamsa Desana. And this little stupa or pagoda or whatever, temple really, it's actually spiral. And so even though it's a square, that spiral terraced nature of it relates to this whole concept of a fifth or a five-sided temple, and also like these little chinks or whatever, clefts in it make it seven-sided actually, but then since it's in a square, the sort of spiral makes it a fifth, implicit of the fifth dimension, so to speak. And this whole thing about Maitreya and a five-walled temple is talked about in that. And again, the fifth element leading to the sixth element. It shows that basically the Meru Shambhala complex and the Maitreya and Pure Land mythology also has a lot of connections to the hyperdimensional, like torus hypercube, fourth dimensional cube symbolism of 666, which again may relate to this, the gates of a Zen. But they've received intimations in dreams by scrying and other means of the presence of entities intent upon communicating certain keys, the use of which would, so again I'm talking about key at the end of the post, the use of which would enable their possessors to unlock the gates beyond Doth. Key is 35, which is 5 times 7. 5 times 17, 85. All of the 17 relations are also important, like 391 being Tantraloka. That came up. It's 23 times 17. That'd be like the supreme, or the 17th Kala, related to Mem, or the path of Mem in blood. Anyway, the use of which would enable their possessors to unlock the gates beyond Doth. So again, this 85 being Yasod, and then mentioning kind of the swiveling, well, really the fall, but this nature of Doth being looked at from different angles. And what was I going to say about that? There's a lot to it. But basically, this 85 thing, as Yasod, Jabura, or Kamael in the fall. Certain things are popping in my head, but it's like the click hasn't happened with it all. But there's like this alchemical nature to these things. I'm trying to remember it all. Ka being like Eka, or one. Ka being essentially void, the empty space of the heart, the cranial vault, Sushumna, relating to the Koth that Kenneth Grant talks about. Akasha, space. I had found that the Ka chakra sits at 6. So the wheel of this void, which it's like the warp in emptiness, I think it was. Warp in emptiness. 666, like this. There's a lot to this 666 as being like like a pulling force that draws out consciousness, not necessarily in the parasitic, vampiric way that it could, but in the natural flow of things, or the flower teaching. And again, another translation of 85 is flower, really. Calyx, the cup of flowers, but calyx. So the time opening nature of that would be implied, which the Snaing Po, I only recently realized Snaing Po was 333, which is very core, and it's like the teaching of selenology in this lunar cyclical teaching, but it's like all these translations are important. The quintessence, which is the 5 elements, the motive force, the energy pulse, flower, thunderbolt, precious stone or sapphire, embryo, heart essence, essential phase, so again the time, all of that connecting to the Kaula Marga or whatever in Sri Vidya is kind of important. But it made me think of how 333 is also, I've always remembered Srog, which is life force, that Rene de Nebesky-Waschtwitz talks about. But I didn't know this until I found another book of his called, like, what is it? Where the Gods Are Mountains. And it made me remember Oracles and Demons of Tibet. But I saw this, and it talked about how he died an early death, essentially, which locals had attributed to him researching and then talking about the Dharmapalas and, like, their secrets. And his book was 666 pages exactly, which leads me to believe he did that intentionally. But he died at 36, and 36, again, 1 through 36 is 666. But it's just 666. It abounds. It says, according to De Jong, Rene de Nebesky-Waschtwitz died of pneumonia. However, his cause of death has been almost completely eclipsed by how tragically young he was when he succumbed. Because of this, an urban legend of sorts has come to surround Nebesky-Waschtwitz's death, with many members of the Tibetan Buddhist community believing his death was actually brought on by the wrath of the very protector deities he studied so assiduously. In his critique of Tibetan shamanism, scholar Jeff Bjerken describes his own personal experience with this widespread belief. Nebesky-Waschtwitz's sudden untimely death shortly after the completion of Oracles and Demons of Tibet was thought to have been brought about by Tibet's protective deities, who were avenging his efforts to reveal their secrets and magic power. At the Library of Tibetan Works and Archives in Dharamsala, when I tried to check out Nebesky-Waschtwitz's text for my research, I discovered that it was not on the shelf with most other books, but kept separate under lock and key. Only after offering the Tibetan librarian my American passport as collateral was I permitted to access the work, although not before being warned of its dangerous content. Among scholars of Tibetan religions, as well as outside observers, opinions vary, with some taking this belief serious and others not. 2 decades prior to Bjerken's account, John Blofeld, a popular British writer on Eastern religions, made the following morbidly droll statement. Tibetans were not surprised when the distinguished author of Oracles and Demons of Tibet came to an untimely end soon after completing that monumental but dullish book. The subjects of Guardians is one on which nothing detailed should be said. To write at length about demons is always held to be unwise, but his ultimate crime was to make them seem boring. This later contention is at times still spoken of in jest among Tibetan specialists today. So I found that all to be just incidental. I don't want to get into that yet, but basically, maybe I just should, because like this Event Horizon telescope, basically, I forgot how that tied in. I was considering these keys, you could say, I guess, regarding 85, checking them against the Kabbalah of 9 chambers. And that's where you see Yad-He Vav-He, obviously. But then up against 222 is Kabbalah, or, well, really Ha-Kabbalah. Hey, Kaf, Beth Lamed. Samkhya, which is the Sanskrit. Samkhya Bhuta is like their numbering system. But Raziel, who gives the Kabbalah from God to man. But then there's Shaitan, or Satan. 85 from 555 is Oth, time. And then Othika comes up. Kenneth Grant even mentions it in 581. He also mentions, surprised I didn't put it there, but essentially, which I need to get back to that, but he mentions 581, or Kasadim, I think, or of the Chaldees. The long line of Adepti praise them. This in the following verse paraphrase the well-known Christian invocation. The long line, or parampara, of Adepti denotes probably the line of prince-priests of the Typhonian dynasties. The oracle 581, Horus, Hrumachus, Othequa, the Ancient One, and Aen Tehom, the Eye of the Abyss, i.e. Saint, the Eye, Aen, of Set. It is further noteworthy that of the Chaldees denotes the light of the Sumerian tradition. Crowley described his work as the reconstitution of the Sumerian tradition, as meaning light, Kashadim. And when you look that up, it's of the Chaldees. But this verse then is a paean of praise in commemoration of the Typhonian Gnosis. And again, the dove he describes as the symbol of the Typhonian Gnosis. So strength, Horus, Hrumachus. The next post is Hrumachus equinox. 4 is again the 4 elements and directions. The Eye of Set, though, and the Eye of the Abyss, 666. It connects to, again, like 85, Gamma, Gimel, Ha-Yesod, and the moon. Gimel and Gamma essentially being the path of the High Priestess, who is attributed to the moon, which crosses the abyss. The moon, especially the new moon, or Amavasya, would be like the eye of Set, or the abyss in a sense. The moon being that parallel to Thoth, the twilight moon. I'm trying to conceive of all this and how it relates. Also, verse 85. And now Sinsinwa sings again his poisonous lullaby. The bird croaks and spits. Its blind eye sees more than its wakeful twin. So again, the Eye of Set, which he associates with Sinsinwa. There was, no doubt, a linkage in the mind of the scryer between the previous oracle, 84, and the moon deity, Sin. The poisonous lullaby celebrates Shoah, the evil woman. Sin, the moon deity, which Amavasya is 120 or 360. So Romer transcribed a fragment of the Chinaman's song in his enigmatic Tale of Chinatown. The bird is the one-eyed raven, black wings, which that connects to 26, which corresponds to 85. But or Avagadu, but perched upon his shoulder, its blind eye sees more than its live companion, the Kafnia, the inner eye, or whatever, which observes merely what is presented to its gaze. The verse number confirms a curious complex of facts, for it is that of Zach, 48, Dunsanian myth cycle, whose templed terraces, so again that terraced temple of the Anagata Devamsa, are the abode of forgotten dreams, the terraced valley of the Yellow River and the remote Honan of which the Chinaman dreamed. It was indeed Dizahab, a place abounding in gold, or Zahab, which is gold, which is 14 doubled. By virtue of his great magical power, Kaf-Cheth, Sinsinwa achieved his goal and his gold. Romer concealed a powerful formula of Chinese magic in a tale of, and it makes me think of the gold flower, formula of Chinese magic in a tale of great subtlety and enchantment. verse 26 itself says steep declivities. The mist hardened a carapace. The steep declivities are the steps formed by the granite blocks. Mist hardened suggests the sleeping mist congeals to some densely etheric substance to form a magical carapace, the shell of protection, about the temple of the empty shrine. The carapace makes me think of the beetle, which makes me think of just all of a sudden Gaia, or the earth. And again, the Kenneth Grant says that the next phase of the human life wave, or the life wave on Earth, will be typified by the beetle, which he relates to the chariot, which he also later relates to the UFO, but also kind of connects to like cyborgs and the Clifothic android in a sense, which ties into the whole Golgotha, the mystery of Golgotha and all that, and the skull. But an eye also opened and closed. The white spider spun its web with mist of empty shrine, must falling incessantly on the paved court, and when the spider moved, the deep black furrows of its web had crisscrossed the granite blocks, steep declivities. Mention has been made of a few of these independent groups, and since that time, of 1977, others have picked up spontaneously a general pattern of which many dissociated elements form unified parts. The more recent manifestations have occurred in Ohio, where Liber Pene Penumbra was earthed through adepts using Mayacian invocations. Soror Indahadna, a contemporary priestess of Mayat, has received snatches from beyond the abyss, and they comprise the Book of the Forgotten Ones. It contains allusions to mysteries that first appeared in the writings of Frater Achad, Charles Stansfeld Jones. It would appear that there exists, just without the circle of mundane awareness, a complete grimoire of magical formulae. It is perhaps from this lost grimoire that artists and poets have been drawing with increasing frequency over the past century, or since the first whirlings of the new eon were adumbrated more than 400 years ago in the writings of Rabelais and earlier initiates. It appears that the most effective way of manifesting these formulae may be achieved by groups of magicians using specialized systems of dream control. Magicians are thereby enabled to compile extensive records of operations involving the invocation and/or evocation of extraterrestrial entities. Several methods of working have been tabulated in Night Side of Eden, and subsumed for the sake of easy reference beneath the degrees of the sovereign sanctuary of the OTO. Frater Achad should be acknowledged as the first herald of an eon beyond or outside the present eon of Horus, inaugurated by Aleister Crowley in 1904. It is well known that Crowley contested Achad's findings, and one of his objections to their validity was that Achad's manner of research was not conducted along lines recognized by established authorities in the field of scholarship. But this begged the question: it was not a valid criticism. Did Crowley accept James Lege's interpretation of the text of the Chinese Yi King, which was presented in accordance with accepted rules of scholarship? No. Furthermore, Crowley maintained that the only interpretation which explains the texts is the initiated interpretation, and that depends upon factors as far removed from scholastic attainment as the appreciation of fine art depends upon factors that have no concern with a knowledge of the merely physical constituents of the pigments employed in its production. In other words, the ultimate test involves not the criteria of scholastic or academic ability, accessible in terms of university degrees, but criteria of initiation which are accessible only by fellow initiates or by those whose degree of initiation is far enough advanced to permit them at least to sense the presence of indubitable authority. In the matters of Achad's proclamation of the Aeon of Mayat and of Crowley's denial of Achad's right to make such an announcement, it is evident that both adepts are here open to similar objections and for precisely similar reasons. having accepted Crowley as a successful transmitter of large and consistent fragments of the lost grimoire, we may at least exceed, in the case of Achad also, a substantial if not an equal degree of authority in matters in which both adepts have proved themselves highly competent at one time or another. Crowley died in 1947. He had no contact with Frater Achad for 11 years. In consequence, neither of them knew the details of any initiations the other had undergone during that period. And 11 years before was 1936, which I believe... In consequence, neither of them knew the details of any initiations the other had undergone since that period. I have given in Cults of the Shadow, Chapter 8, a brief account of the circumstances surrounding the incoming of the Aeon of Maat and of Crowley's magical position at the time of his death with regard to Frater Achad. Crowley appeared to have reached a dead end, while Achad seems to have formulated an impossible situation with his claim that a new Aeon had dawned. But this has proved otherwise, and it is interesting to note that Frater Achad's work is now, nearly 30 years later, seen to be vindicated, at least in part. He announced the dawn of the Aeon of the Daughter, which would complement and polarize the Aeon of the Son ushered in by Crowley. These two eons run, which again, that was 44 years. 1904 plus 44 was 48, which was the year he announced the Aeon of Maat in his writings. And 44 years later was when I was born. That was when Hecate's Fountain, Grant's next book, was written. And kind of like ties in, I think, when he said something happened, but with the new Isis Lodge, that's why he kind of wrote their like stories about it in Hecate's Fountain. But that seemed pivotal as another cycle, because then 19 years later it was 2011, which is when major things seem to happen again with this egg that came about on April 2nd. And I don't know, it's just what I've seen. There'd be, so again, 44 times 44. There's some date connection of gestation that all this relates to, but these two eons run consecutively. The god form of the Aeon of Maat, the mother, is the vulture. The god form of the Aeon of Horus, the son, is the hawk. But the god form of Ma'ayan, the daughter, is the vampire bat, sometimes the moth, he says. The daughter is the mother unawakened. In the language of the mysteries, the daughter is the priestess entranced, i.e. immersed in magical sleep and active at astral levels of consciousness. The magical formulae of Ma'ayan therefore involve the mysteries of dream control. The symbols of these formulae are zoomorphic. The mouth, or sexual orifice, for Maat, typified by the moth and the vulture. The phallus, or for Horus, typified by the eye and the hawk. The mouth, oral orifice for Ma, typified by the bat which hangs upside down, Viparita, in the sleep, or Yoga Nidra, induced by the vampire feast. This magic is expressed Kabbalistically as 0 equals 2. So again, that 2 unity formula, really, it makes me think of a lot of things, but which is the formula of Nuit. Not is the mother, and the 2 are Horus, the son, and Ma, the daughter. Their synchronicity is resumed beneath the symbol of the bee, which is a vehicle, or the vehicle of Sekhet. It is the symbol of sweetness, honey, Meli. 85. A lunar glyph pertaining to the rapture associated with the process of creation. Lunar honey is generated by the perfect alignment of the mouth and the eye in inner vision. The symbolism is partially explained in the secret comment written by Crowley for Liber Agape, which contains a quotation of the biblical verse, "What is sweeter than honey and what is stronger than a lion?" Judges 14:18. The symbols, translated into the language of sexual alchemy, are the veils of a magical formula that has in recent years become a matter of general knowledge owing to the publication of certain writings by Aleister Crowley, originally reserved for initiates of his esoteric organizations. But the cosmic link was lacking, and it was not until the present author became acquainted with the unpublished writings of Frater Achad that he was able to establish a connection between this particular kind of sexual magic and the extraterrestrial power zone of Set. The latter is represented astronomically by the Sirius complex. So it makes me think of how Silver Star, he also mentions as 581 in this book, with its son and daughter stars, Sirius A and Sirius B. Achad's researches were expressed mainly in biblical phraseology and only secondarily in the terminology of the 93 current. Even so, we find in Achad's 3 stones, see the official and unofficial correspondence with Kowal and Handel, a key to the mysteries of Set, for the 3 names of the stones add up to 936, which is the number of Orthrus, the twin of the dog Cerberus, the symbol of Set. Achad was unaware of this fact, but he intuited a connection with the mysteries of time and the 4 jewels or stones implicit in the formula of Kali. By gematria, Kali is 61, Ain, the hidden eye, reflected as Ain in manifest vision. Ain, a form of Yoni, is the source of the manifestation of images, i.e. the imagination. Makes me think of how Ain plus 15, which is what its number as the devil, and then the path of the devil is 26. So 3 references to the devil. It's like further. It's like the Holy Trinity, but opposite or whatever, or perhaps what the Holy Trinity divinizes, because there's a lot of different ways to look at 85 as that devil with the extra L, or King James's devil, and then Yod, or Hey Vav Hey Yod, and not that that matters, but again, it's there in my mind as obvious. The mysteries of time, Kali, are identical with those of space, Nuit. In this part of the formula, complex as it is being currently expounded by several arcane schools. In particular, by the Cult of the Black Snake, directed by Michael Bertaux, whose researches into the formulae of time travel should be studied in this connection. And so I guess I should mention it, but when looking at the further things, like 777 minus 85 is the Greek kaibos, but also the reverse of haaretz. It's the gamma cross, or the gammadion. But then you get the bat, which again is related to the daughter, and the eon of truth and justice, and the incoming of the eon of Maat, and Nymphi, which he mentions as 999. But you got Ha Yachavetz Razim, the knower of secrets, and then also the leap or contraction of the road, which I had gotten from some gematria database that's no longer active. I think it's this Esoteric Delights, or no, that's DMT Nexus. I had it linked forever, but the Kafitzat Haderach, or contraction of the road, is a Hebrew term used in Jewish sources referring to miraculous travel between 2 distant places in a brief time. And again, the time meaning or being 85, Yesod. It makes me wonder what could come from this, because I don't really know, but the fact that there's this reference, then there's other things that I found, like the Aspacularia Nera or Luminous Mirror, just different things that are ancient references to potential future technologies that exceed what you would expect possible. Oh yeah, the Ur Kasadim or Kazdim is the Ur of the Chaldees, which was also a lunar moon worshipping city. But yeah, this Kafitzat Haderach may relate to the Zimzum, and it makes me think of the Chakma 2 wisdom. It's there's something to do with the unity wisdom of Kether, and it's potentials that this leads to, essentially. But another weird thing that stands out as synchronistic or whatever, especially with the last post, which counts up to 2025, the first verse of Genesis, Barashith bara Elohim va'ath ha'aretz, is 37 times 73. And then it's already been mentioned, like in various, like here, and then even ironically on gematrix or whatever .org, it says, the esoteric material presented on these pages involves the revelation of information which has been hidden. Throughout history, individuals and organizations have chosen to guard their secrets by various cryptic means, and gematria is not only one of these, but arguably has the most distinguished provenance of any. Although gematria starts with the base, or the book of Genesis, was ubiquitous in the culture of the ancient Greeks and forms a blueprint for the foundation of Christianity, the main focus of this website concerns more recent history in the culture of the English-speaking world. In particular, the gematria of English provides the key to unlocking many of the secret doctrines of the Freemasons and the true identity of the greatest writer in the English language, William Shakespeare. What is gematria? The Oxford English Dictionary defines gematria as a Kabbalistic method of interpreting the Hebrew Scriptures by interchanging words whose letters have the same numerical value when added. This is actually a rather restrictive definition because gematria was every bit as important to other peoples in antiquity, and examples of its use are more common in the culture of classical Greece than in Judaism. Hebrew and Greek are the two languages with which gematria has been traditionally associated, and until now the gematria of other languages has not been on such a secure footing. On this website, I demonstrate that English, with its origin in Latin script, is every bit as valid a language for gematria, and that its heritage by this means is as rich as those of Hebrew and Greek. The only difference being that gematria coding of English has been one of the best kept secrets of the English-speaking world. How does it work? Gematria works on the premise that the letters of the alphabet can also be used as numbers, and therefore words and phrases acquire distinctive numerical values. A well-known example is that of God, whose name spelt in Hebrew is Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, 26. The values of these four letters are 10 plus 5 plus 6 plus 5. Thus, the number of his name is 26. It follows that from this, by means of numerical equivalence, that God is identifiable with Ahava and Achad, love and unity. Because the letter values of these two words sum is 1 plus 5 plus 2 plus 5 and 1 plus 8 plus 4, being 26. Why the name gematria? Gematria is said to derive from the Greek word gematria, or geometria, meaning geometry. It may also be compounded with the word gramma, meaning writing. The reason for the geometric connection is because the rules of sacred geometry play an important part in the secondary encoding of literary Kabbalah. Isolated numbers, such as 26, have only limited utility. They are the words of the numerical language. The sentence structure or grammar rules derive from number patterns which are conformed according to the properties of sacred geometry. The creator we can consider, for example, Avesica Pisces, one of the most important figures in sacred geometry. Avesica, with a width of 26, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, the creator, has a height of 45, which is the gematria value of the man he created, Adam, Aleph Daleth Mem. The difference between God and man is 45. 45 minus 26 is 19, this is the value of the woman created as a companion for Adam, Chava, or Eve, Cheth Vav He. In this way, the sacred Vesica defines the relationship between the Creator and mankind. God's primal act of creation is encapsulated by the first verse of Genesis. The Hebrew words here, Brashith bara Alhim ath Hashamim ath haaretz, I always forget the Hashamim, have a value of 2701. Among the many interesting properties of this number is the fact that it comprises the sum of 26 squared So Yod He Vav He squared, or cube, or yeah, squared. I always say cubed. Squared. Sit 76. And 45 squared. 2025. Hence the combination of God and Adam. So 2701 minus 2025 is Sit 76. 26 times 26. Which, that has a lot of connections in and of itself. I think it's the branch, a name for Jesus. This means that the 26 by 45 rectangle enclosing the vesica of creation has a diagonal of the square root of 2701. In addition to this, the circle within which the rectangle may be precisely drawn has a circumference of 163, and by this means can symbolize that which was created. Alhim, Avlim, Hazah. So Ayin. It is also a fact that the area of the rectangle is equal to that of a square with a perimeter of 139, the value of Gan Alhim, the Garden of Eden. And Gan is 703, or no wait, 703 is part of this whole snowflake, they call it, situation, because it's really 1 through 37. But 666 is encapsulated by 3 1 through 37s. So 136, and that makes this thing. And there's a lot of different things that can, like ways it can be considered, along with Logos as 373, and there's little indicators again that show there is, like, you could say sacred geometry, but it's like figurate numbers, and then their meanings tie in with actual like developments or whatever, or manifestations. Anyway, so the time travel thing is, oh yeah, as for modern connections, where was it? Recently there was like news that there's evidence of negative time found in quantum physics experiment, and it's just interesting. Like, I ended up finding, you can look at time as Teth Yod Mem He or Tau Yod Mem He, but then when you add negative, which is 89, but negative time is time less than 999. So time and negative time make 999, which again relates to the eon of Mayat and the concurrent eons. So plus time. Time and negative time, the two flows of, like, the two time flows, which makes me think of Aquarius. And recently, I think it was like Pluto. There's been a lot of weird astrological alignments. Pluto was at like 0 degrees Aquarius, I think at the beginning, at the end of last year at some point. Mars was opposing the sun, and that's when I started developing, like started looking at all this. So Event Horizon Telescope with a Shin is 999. I had found that the Great Filter, tying in with ufology, is also 888. So again, the Gamadion, there's some quarantine or filter, you could say. The Black Triangle, when I was studying that in Post 82, is called the Aurora Project, but the Aurora is 888. So again, this time travel symbolism is another thing, and optics, Newton's optics. So, where was it? The Great Filter. And the Great Filter is basically this tied in with the whole Fermi paradox. But I was reading here, and I think it was this. Yeah, it mentions the idea was first proposed in an online essay titled The Great Filter, Are We Almost Past It? The first version was written in August 1996, and the article was last updated September 15th, 1998. and that was the day Mechanical Animals came out. Wait, was that 26? So it was 26. But right before this album, John 5 started with Marilyn Manson on, he was in a band with Rob Halford, which I've been recently listening to this a lot. My favorite song is probably Water's Leaking, although each one has gotten stuck in my head. And there's a lot of fun, like, again, 2 is 85. The subway train, I noticed in my database, subway is 85. I had noticed it was released March 10th of that year, and then I was like, wait, March 10th, where did I see that recently? And that's when I posted this. And so again, I'm not like trying to make these synchronicities. Even if I did, it's extensive. That would be like, how could I think of that? But it's just something I noticed. The key to these mysteries is to be sought in various esoteric schools of magic and sorcery. Validity of claims to competent transmission of the mysteries may be tested and proved by their affinity with 93 and the Ophidian current which that number represents. And it makes me think of, like, recently there was this, they're trying to pass off this egg UFO type thing and no one's buying it. It's ironic. It's just funny though. Again, the 1 through 11, the great work is 85. But 93 minus, oh yeah, egg UFO or egg code would be 93. But then 85 is also 11 or egg less or more, than seed. Seed being like the male counterpart to the female egg. 85 minus Adam and Eve was 21, which somehow, like, one Yod Hey Vav Hey is 26, but if you take the extra Hey out, 21 minus 21 is Zodi. And so again, 5 and 17 of the 85 are Hey and the star, which Crowley switches. So Hey is actually Zodi, or Zodi is not the star. So Yod Hey Vav Zodi could be like the evolution of Tetragrammaton in a sense on the stellar, like, it makes me think of, again, the star and the fall and then the regeneration or whatever. Regeneration is 999, which goes into a lot of things relating to Kalki, Maitreya, Ajita, etc. Oh yeah, Buddhist with a shin, reincarnation. So reincarnation with a gimel is 999. So again, the Eon of Truth and Justice, White Rider or White Horse Rider. Yeah, Horse Rider. Basically, like the death. There's a bunch of little keys in the tarot that tie into ancient Hindu and certain Buddhist texts, coming, like what I'm coming to find, that you can look at the gematria through either lens of, like, tarot / magical / like Camelot Grail symbolism, which is biblical in a sense. It merges, basically. There's like biblical symbolism, Grail / Camelot symbolism, and then like Hindu and Buddhist. Either way, again, the various esoteric schools are like keys. Members of the cult of Mayat in Ohio have, in cult, I went and like looked what's the Sanskrit equivalent of cult, and it would be Bhakti. 47 keeps coming up, but Bhakti is 47. Maha. But again, going to Maitreya and how Maitreya Buddha is 111. Metta is another form of Maitreya, essentially. Metta Bhakti, or like the cult of Maitreya. Maitreya and Mayat, Metatron, have been related, but they kind of are. Metatron, Melchizedek, being righteous, Mayat being the truth, and mathematics, etc. So they've discovered a few lines, perhaps even a few pages, of this invisible grimoire of which Berthaud and others are also deciphering the runes. Any genuine occult organization can therefore produce evidence of the validity of its contacts on the inner planes by the necessity which each fragment is found to bear to the whole. Even so, caution must be exercised in the assessment of such necessity. The reason for such caution is evident when it is realized how little able was an adept of Crowley's stature even to judge of the course of protracted initiations which involved not only himself but several other individuals, e.g. Eckenstein, Bennett, Fuller, G.C. Jones, and C.S. Jones, and Jack Parsons. The work of Achad and of Parsons, John Parsons, one time head of a lodge of the OTO in California, he was a scientist who worked on jet propulsion techniques. He finally blew himself to pieces in a laboratory accident and has since had a rare distinction of having named after him a mountain on the moon. Exhibited profound awareness of a cosmic unfoldment that may not always be consciously recognized, even by those who are able unconsciously to pick up and express aspects of the current. How complex the pattern is may be appreciated by the fact that when Parsons received Liber 49, the Book of Babylon, which he proclaimed to be the 4th chapter of A.L., it was in magical concert with L. Ron Hubbard. And it says, it is here of interest to note another strange ramification of the web, for according to Frank B. Long, Hubbard met, years before his collaboration with Parsons, the man whose name will always be associated with extraterrestrials and life forms, H.P. Lovecraft. See Howard Philip Lovecraft by Frank Belknap Long, Arkham House, 1975. And so... I think he says like that extraterrestrial contact was established. It remains to be seen what part of the puzzle Hubbard may manifest, Scientology, but that he clutched at it through the door opened by Parsons is shown by the circumstances attendant upon the Babylon working, for an account of which see the Magical Revival. The working began in 1945 and through 6, a few months before Crowley's death in 1947, and just prior to the wave of unexpected aerial phenomena now recalled as the Great Flying Saucer Flap. Parsons opened a door and something flew in. He supposed it was Babylon in the 4th chapter of A.L. Others have supposed other things, but all are agreed that something unusual, something inexplicable by mundane laws occurred around that time. Both Crowley's and Achad's prolonged initiations led up to this phenomena, which charged the 40s with the atmosphere of menace adumbrated in 1904 in A.L. chapter 3, verse 46. 46 is the number of Mu, or Mu, the cry of the vulture of Mayat, and essentially the Greek mem, and the key of the mysteries. And mem actually spelled out would be 85. So the water relating to the moon, and the honey, essentially, the honeymoon, he calls it, and which fulminated in Hiroshima in 1945. And perhaps the revelation of these mysteries is likewise preparing the way for the 80s that cower before me and are abased. Various writers have suggested that extra-mundane intelligences are apprehensive about nuclear disturbances originating on Earth. The UFO flap that commenced after Hiroshima was considered by some to be part of an investigation into the situation here on Earth, which may lead to the abandonment of what is, perhaps, after all, merely an experiment in human evolution. It will not be the first time that such an experiment has failed. See the Book of Zion, the Borosian account of creation, etc. On the other hand, man likes to feel, no doubt, that his puny activities could disturb remote galaxies. He may hazard extinction even for the sake of exalting his ego in such a manner. That makes me think I forgot that chode, or really it's the Tibetan pronunciation of gachod. Chod is like to sever the ego. Ego being 78, 7 being the sort of the sword. Man's thinking is determined by the mass media to a larger extent than he is prepared to admit. He therefore tends to interpret occult phenomena in terms of extraterrestrials, spacecraft constructed on principles he will one day himself understand and use, such as out of metal, planetary and interplanetary wars, and so on. To the occultist, however, a quite different interpretation suggests itself. For example, the word abased in the above quotation is, by gematria, equivalent to the word alalia, which Friedrich Chod discovered in 1943. Both are forms of the number 73, chakma, essentially. Alalia conceals a magical formula of the 73 current, which works through the feminine aspect of chakma in his phallic function. Chakma, wisdom, is the name of the second sephira. It is represented astronomically by the sphere of the fixed stars called Mazloth, and Mesla is the influence from Kether, kind of means fate. Mesla is 78, 1 through 12. So again, the zodiac. It is the secret zone of the temple of starry wisdom. And again, 73 Gimel is what the path that crosses the abyss, but also what extends from Kether essentially into the abyss. And 85 is also Endeka, which is the number 11, which is also related to the abyss. So, and what Gimel or the camel crosses, and also what the moon essentially crosses from being new, like the new to the full moon. So Chakma is the wise one who appears as Gimel, the priestess of the silver star. Silver star being 581. I mean, corresponding, making 666 with the 85. Who is the female Hierophant, he said Hieroplant, but Hierophant in the form of the moon. Chakma, and so again, the Hierophant is He, which really kind of connects with the Emperor. But Chakma is therefore the Logos whose word is Alalia. The word cower is equal to 237, again, Vaktra, which is that of Heka, the great magic power of Sefek, the goddess, 393. And Sefek and Sekhmet, they say, are equivalent to Sima Vaktra or Sima Muka or Sangdangma. 237 is also, and 237 comes up in post 79 as being 79, no wait, 237 minus 79. Yeah, it's the 3 pillars, but also bodhisattvas. But yeah, 237 is also the number of Aosic, spelt in a certain manner, an extraterrestrial entity whose name has had particular significance since the year 1945, the year in which Parsons opened the door. Adding 73 to 237 produces 310, the number of Shat, or Shat, a form of Set, which identifies this number with the silver star, and of Mem, Kaf, Pe, Zadi, meaning leaping or jumping. So again, the contraction of the path, or the contraction of a path. The contraction of a path, again, being this key to the whole tree of life folding up. If the reader will turn to the remarks on the vaulters in Night Side of Eden, it will become apparent that all these ideas denote a jump through time and space, a leaping through the door of Doth, knowledge by the wise one, who manifests from alien dimensions, typified by Sirius in the god Set. His wisdom is transmitted via the word or logos discovered by Crowley in 1904 and Achad in 1943, which I think he means 8, but in a curious amalgam that comports the no word of the eon of Zain, or Z-Ain. See remarks on Nia, Ain, and Zain in Night Side of Eden. See also Chapter 6 of the present book. Note that Zain is a metathesis of Azin, the number of which is 718. The significance of this equation will emerge in due course. 718 being Aosic Iwas, but also he ended up later, I'm sure, finding it to be Akbish, or Kuvri Akbish, which is the spider's web. Yeah, so, oh yeah, without the hay. Kuvri Akbish, which is the spider's web. And he goes more into pay later on, and I know that somewhere he also makes another typo, but I think I resolved it. So he says, again, pay relates to the pylon that goes up and then the pit that goes down, and the whole Samek, the paths of Samek and Pei cross just above the moon, or Yesod, connecting essentially Yesod, Tifereth, Hod, and Netzach. And that relates to a lot of things I talked about in Post 81 regarding Samek as the prop, or the nail, or really the, what is it, the Vajrakalaya, or the Furba. As Pei, 85, it includes the tongue, for the clitoris, and the teeth, symbolic of spirit, as the trident of Set. And also 300 plus 85 is Shekinah, which is the dwelling place, and I forgot what all that tied to, but I know that essentially the 85 and 385 are related. 385 connects to, makes me think of the keys to the gateway of magic, and Metatrona. 85 is the number of the Greek word Endeka, meaning 11. This is the number of Nuit and of the Qliphoth, with its tunnels or mouths through which matter is sucked into inner space. So again, the black hole, which relates to the Ma-ion, corresponding also with the green stone, being 476, is the Ma-ion. And 190, again, which is wisdom, is the sum of 1 through 19. And so it's a solar number. Again, the black hole is solar, or anti-solar, essentially. But what else was it? I had it right here. The Gurdjieff's like ladder, or magnitude of the magnitudes of being, sum up to 190. So again, it's like the middle pillar in a sense. But 190 is also connected to Mahakala as black cloak, or Bernag Chen Mahakala, the black hole, the end of time, or the appointed time, Mahakala teaching. Mahakala is called the Black One, which I came to find, black with Kaf final, one. And it symbolizes it being outside time and space and even the mind. But then there's all these different things I came to find that kind of express certain teachings in the depth of Mahakala. The 99, Mahakala being 99, and the whole reversals, and that whole diamond I was mentioning is kind of a big key. Disintegration of Mahakala, because the triple head Mahakala on the Furba is kind of further strengthened with all these things that I ended up finding regarding that. And there's different spellings of Furba and Furpa that you can find different things with, essentially. But again, the time warping of Mahakala and this whole jumping and leaping concept kind of connects to a lot of different things in different subjects. Again, even the missing time situation. Ha-Shabbath being 777 and the Sabbath. Also having ties to like witchcraft or traditional witchcraft, the Sabbath, Sabbati, etc. These ancient shamanic rituals like the Agni Kayana. Fritz Stahl, his name itself, is 777, but then without the tau, 386 is 391 less than 777, and 391 is Agni Kayana ritual. So again, this swastika is connected to all that. I'll have to go further into that, but it's just crazy. But above all, the mouth is the supreme symbol of Maat, for by the same mouth, Ipsos, 58, the green stone, in that book, I actually have it quoted, but I want to just read it. It's on page 107, the other secret spelling of Ma'ayan being related to the egg and the stone. This whole book, I'll have to go into like a sort of synopsis of it, which I can find, but I can't find a PDF to like give access to it, so you just have to try to get it. But there's a lot of stuff in it relating to the Knights Templar, John Dee, the Rosicrucians, all the way up to like basically they found a bunch of stuff through what they called psychic questing. And then it's picked up in a later book by Andrew Collins called The Seventh Sword. But they found this gemstone essentially in a wooden cask or box near a certain area, which Andrew Collins explains it best. But there was like ordeals or obstacles that they had to sort of go through, and which they symbolized by the 9 worthies that are like painted in this thing called Harvington Hall, and a bunch of different things relating to that I'll have to just get into, but real quick. Humphrey Pakington is like at the center of some of it, and his initials, HP, is 85. The Hall, which it mentions, is the 66, so 85. Harvington Hall being this Elizabethan medieval manor house with a moat even. It's like something out of Legends, and it's just crazy. But there's some pictures of it, and it says that it ended up being like left to Lady Mary Yate, who lived to be 86 or 85. So again, there's just 85s all over this, and it helps me remember this. But 58 being the reverse, and Ha'aben of Yahelem, the precious stone. I found it significant on page 107 is like the crescendo of when there's like this sort of battle in a sense. And it says, the stone burned into Marion's hand. She had to stop it. Use the stone. She felt the power growing within her, her spirit body overflowing with energy. Concentrating her entire force of will against the fiery abomination, she felt an immense shock jar her body. It was turning on her. There followed a brief moment of struggle. It was too powerful. It could overcome all that was directed towards it. She knew she could not destroy the evil by force. It thrived on such actions. She must return its own malefic intent. Use the stone to reflect its power. Light burst round Marion as she held the stone before her. The abomination recoiled. Enveloped in an intense whiteness, it gave a final embittered cry and was gone. The woman sank to her knees, bathed in white light. Then she ran in terror. The power of the witch coven and their priestess was at last broken. The demon was gone. Marion woke from the strange sleep and blinked up at them. She relaxed and smiled. It's all over, she said. signed with exhaustion. We have done it. We've won. Now we can rest. The force had lost its power over the Warwickshire coven. That night they all believed the evil had finally been destroyed, but in reality it had lost only the first battle. Now it had an advantage, for at last it was aware of its opponents. And so it's just ironic, like the reflective power of the stone is kind of the crucial key in that book regarding what the power, like that stone, they call it like the stone of Meonia or Meonia, and it's associated with a sword in particular, really 7 swords, which they took a picture in August 1992. I need to go into that on its own, but the Blasted Tower is the title of the tarot trump to which the letter Pe, a mouth, is attributed. And again, blasted is 111. The bolt of lightning, which blasts it, is 111. You could think of the eye, the mouth, or Pe as the tower, really. And then 26 is the path of the eye, and it's the eye of God, or the eye of Shiva, that blasts the tower. The identity of the 2 mouths, uterus and meatus, is also implied. So again, the male and female, Adam and Eve. The mouth and the myth are one. They meet in the symbol of truth and the true word exemplified by Maat, the mother vulture. The ancient myths were transmitted by word of mouth before writing was invented. So again, like for these things to connect without, it just shows the underlying Divani of the Vakya that lends power to the mantras, or the Mahavakya. The later written accounts became the legends, the legible or written versions of the earliest truths. As Gerald Massey has amply demonstrated, there were 2 primal truths, the Maat or mouth of water, and in Buddhism, the 2 truths doctrine. The feminine source or fount, and the Maat or mouth of air, the masculine inspiring spirit, the revivifying agent and the vivifying spirit, so the seed and the egg. In most ancient mysteries known to man, both these truths were represented as feminine, the Maat or mother of blood, being the primal matrix of all things, which in simple gematria, matrix is 85, while, anyway, in Greek, Omicron, Mu, Alpha, Tau, Rho, Iota, Chi is 581. So the mouth and the matrix essentially being 666. Chapter 6, which he mentioned, I think is where, right here he says 85 times 2 is 160. I think what he means by that is Pe itself, which Pe spelled out is 85, but Pe itself times 2 would be 160. He says is the number of sucked or suckled, Yod, Nun, Kaf, for drinking and offering, and 85 times 85 though is, or 85 plus 85 is 170, which is like the Hebrew word for wand, or Mem, Kaf, Lamed. Also, I think lightning, lightning itself, I was going to say lightning bolt, but it would be 281. But again, lightning. So this symbolism, it's all like, it all keeps up with itself in some weird way. It exceeds like the cognitive or like conscious mind, but also it can be guiding. There's 47 again. I don't know. 47. Freighter 47. For the interpretation of numbers 317, 650. 650 is mem with mem final. Or in Hebrew with the yod is it mem, yod, mem. Anyway, there's this whole thing is deep. 789 being temperance connects in many ways to the tarot card of that, because art, Crowley calls it, makes 999. But then Temperance plus Michael, the angel on the card, is 888, Jesus. But 789, again, the 777, 888, 999 being that regenerative and healing aspect of temperance. I know he mentioned somewhere, like I had read through this, and he mentions vitality. And I don't want to go reread this whole chapter because I think it's the double-tongued one chapter. Again, the double-tongued one, the two, and the unity. But he mentions vitality, and that goes with the Chinhua. And again, the lunar cycles. He also says that the tower and Pei, like, something about it's the ultimate expression of, like, alien communication. Because, again, the mouth and the tower and reaching to the heavens, it's like a lightning rod also for communication. There he links the chalice or goblet with the flower. Sakha, the ark or tabernacle, and of the number 11, the Endeka. So yeah, the number 85 thus comprehends all extraterrestrial radiations. And further in the ninth arch, another thing I had wanted to go into was the appendixes essentially also indicate the 5 and the 17, because the first appendix is about the sign of protection, which he associates with the pentagram, and then the next one is about frequency of the number 17 in connection with the Typhonian Gnosis. 17 relating to Ursa Major, or really Orion, but also the swastika, which is formed by Arctos or Ursa Major in the 4 seasons. And 17 times 17 is the star, 289, the star, but also tarot itself. And tarot is like Rota or Ta'urt, which is related to Typhon, and again, the hurricane or just the wheel. Purba is also 289. So the sign of protection, the signs and symbols printed in books are stylized mnemonics communicated by specific intelligences and or spirits. The sign of protection, however, is not formed as one would form a regular figure such as the pentagram, hexagram, etc., but according to requirement. A very special form of defense is necessary against hostile forces from outside. A particular angle of the figure has to be projected into another dimension. Such a figure cannot accurately be committed to paper, nor may it be traced in air. So again, implying the 5th dimension, or the whirling motion of time as a sort of buffer, which that's what I think that the swastika represents, is having the general space, but then moving. And again, the 4 seasons are kind of implied, but the 4th dimension. Such a sign has plenary magical potential only when projected mentally by one who has established two-way traffic with his daemon, again, Tiferet, or the heart chakra, whose word he has received. Those who have passed the pylon of Samek, Samek means prop, standing stone, pylon, or pillar. It is the ideogram of Set. The passing of the pylon should be achieved in the 5th degree of the OTO. So again, the pylon or the prop of Samek will be familiar with the curious sloping sensation that precedes a shift of consciousness beyond everyday awareness, as occurs in dreams, trances, ecstasies, profound anguish, or in vertigo. The sign of protection is the most ancient form of the pentagram. It was known originally by the Kamite designation Sabao, meaning abode of stars. It is represented by the star of Set, figured in the heavens as the eye of the southern pole itself, symbolic of the Amenta or hidden land. So again, the Meru, Lord of the World, like Leroy du Monde by René Duignon comes to mind, and the Shambhala connection. As our model, we shall take the stylized pentangle, bearing in mind that it may only be suggested on a plane surface. So again, cone. Like another translation of Jabio, or Gavia, is trophy, I found, but also cone, like an ice cream cone, which Kenneth Grant really goes a lot into as being a key Austin Osman Spare gives. When the word of the daemon is vibrated correctly, it extends the required angle of vision. This extension vibrates and creates a whirling cone, vortex, or funnel, which sucks in and destroys the hostile force. In the process, the star is distorted by elongating and twisting the appropriate angle out of proportion to the figure's remaining nodal points. The latter are then to be extended in turn according to the diverse directions or dimensions of the threatening powers. Together with the distortion, so again, the disintegration of Mahakala, together with the distortion, there occurs a distortion of sound, of vibration. So again, sound being the black hole. This phenomenon is paralleled by the Hindu pranava, which in ideographic form exemplifies literally twisted sound. But there is an almost insurmountable obstacle to the projection of this vibration beyond the realms of the known universe. The sign of protection must needs reach beyond the ring-pass-not sentinels of astral, etheric, and mental rings, which are merely conceptual. If it is to penetrate the outside, matter must be dematerialized and reintegrated as something quite other in order to strike at the roots of invading alien influence. So if it's clifothic, it will be like recycled essentially, or it won't have any foundation. This basic fact was understood by the ancient adepts in some of their teachings on the subject of Ein Sof, outer void, though with specific reference to the sign of protection, were incorporated in a paper prepared by more recent adepts of the Golden Dawn, entitled The Law of the Convoluted Revolution of the Forces, symbolized by the 4 aces, tarot, around the northern pole. So again, the swastika. Concerning the translation of matter from one dimension to another, the formula is described in Kabbalistic terminology, and its meaning will be seen to resonate with our remarks above. The symbol of the connection between Malkuth of Yetzirah, mental, and the Kether of Asaya, material, will be a form somewhat resembling an hourglass. So again, the 72 relation to the Ogdoad and the Ennead. The thread of the Ein Sof, traversing the center thereof and forming the connection between the worlds, so that the symbol, hourglass, of the connection between the planes, dimensions, is this, and also the modus operandi of the translation of the form from one plane or dimension to another is this, hourglass, and hence does the title of the sphere of Kether of Asaya signify commencement of the whirling motion. And that makes me think of, again, the meaning of, or 391 as the inscrutable heights of Kether, and the 17 and the swastika in the Sahasrara chakra, essentially. Ate, Aleph, or Aleph plus Tau, which is, above the head in the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram. 517 is consciousness, but then again, 5 times 17 is 85. And hence does the title, the twisted form spiral. From the diagram of the hourglass symbol, it will be manifest that the Malkuth of Yetzirah will be the transmitter of the Yetziratic forces into Kether of Asaya, that the latter will be the recipient thereof, and that the hourglass symbol or double cone will be the translator from one plane or dimension unto the other. And that makes me think of, again, the hierarchical evocation described in Summa Sacrae Magicae and Ordines Descendens. Any forces in Malkuth may act through the upper cone of the hourglass symbol, and by means of the lower one translate its operation into the Kether below. But its mode of transmission will be through the cones of the thread of Ein Sof or of the unformulated. So again, Kether transmits through clear pulses. I can't explain it, but when studying orgone in 398, I started contemplating Kether and the force of Kether as being, it's highly related to this duality principle and recursion or reversion. So that in the transmission between the two worlds, manifest and unmanifest, La and Al, or Al and La via Ma, as he describes it in the formula of Lamal, the formulate must first become unformulate ere it can reformulate in new conditions. Zimzum. Other aspects of the cone were noted by Aleister Crowley in connection with the fourth dimension, which he worked into the fourth chapter of Moonchild. And Kenneth Grant mentions how he confusedly, I guess, mentioned like the Empress and Daleth and Venus as some key to essentially the fourth, or the final Hay, and the fourth aspect of Tetragrammaton. Kenneth Grant tried to like say that it was actually the twins or Zane, but you have to read, I think, that double-tongued one chapter. But whilst en route, the points of the cones pierce the ethers like a needle, paralyzing any hostile force inhabiting them. In Spare's diagrammatic drawing, see frontispiece, note that the descending cone depends from a pentagon. So again, the cone being related to 17 as the swastika, essentially, and the pentagon being the 5, the extreme distortion of which is caused by space-time dilation. A similar distortion links the Zos-Illyarun-Eosic complex with the formula of Zos-Vel-Thanatos, stylized or more appropriately stellaized in the plaque reproduced in Zos Speaks. Page 154. The stela designed by Spare incorporated the encoded formulas activated to form the basis of the Zos Kia Cultus, founded in conjunction with New Isis Lodge. Spare fleshed the formula of the double cone or hourglass in feminine form with sigils and sentient symbols located at the zones relevant to their function in the subtle body. And that kind of connects, while I have it up, I can never remember the title of this book, but this Matrika, Sri Matrika Viveka, and the Matrika Chakra Yantra teachings, but really how, in the Tantra Loka, it talks about the syllables of the Sanskrit alphabet being what empower the body, essentially, and their movement, and different functions being different letters or syllables. Again, that's complicated, but Ka coming to mind again. It doesn't just mean a void in a hollow channel. It also means the 9 senses. But firmament, breath, sky. Cipher, but also zero. So the zero chakra. Friedrich Chod had envisaged independently and perhaps deployed his star of manifestation, see diagram 3 on page 430, in a similar context. He hinted also at a mode of invocation involving a special order of Shaktis, or letters, in the 13 angles of the star, to bring into manifestation the defensive influences of the Maoshan Gnosis. A Chod's star was thus also a sign of protection. Major Typhonian implicits of the hourglass formula may be recognized in the following representations of key factors of the Eon of Zain. North being Typhon, south being Set, the double cone being, which relates to many diagrams of time, space-time, obviously, and then hourglass of Isis. The hourglass, by shape, is a figure of Isis, or a figure of 8, and a vertical form of the mathematical sign for infinity. The double cone comprises the 7 Set, Typhon, and the 8 Isis in their dynamic phase, i.e. with phallus, Yod, as new Isis. New Isis as Nun Yod, and then Yod Shin, Yod Shin, is also that 676, or 26 times 26. This is the key to the Stela 718 of AL chapter 3 verse 19, fused with the Stela of Zosfeld Thanatos as the basic formula of the Eon of Zain, thus manifesting the thread of the Ein Sof. In summary, the potency of the sign of protection is dependent, and so yeah, it's made, that cone is made by the thread of the Ein Sof, or the infinite. In summary, the potency of the sign of protection is dependent upon the magician's ability to release and to direct the vibration of the word communicated to him by his daemon, and to sever with the sword, Zain, the intrusive tentacles from outside. And here in Appendix 3, he aligns the Shaitan Iwas concepts with the Sin Sin Wa complex of Sax Romer. This whole thing is kind of deep, but also just so recurring, or like cyclical, and it makes things, I don't know, like it makes me stay on track, even though it's so far out. Anyway, I think that's probably too much as it is. Oida.